Hello, and welcome to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. This podcast is dedicated to the aspiring writer or artist and will provide inspiration and tips from top professionals in the field, along with contest winners and tonight's very special guests, all the way from down under in Australia. We have last year's event in October where we introduced Chris Winspear from Volume 36 with his story, The Trade. We also have Michael Gardner from Down Under in Volume 36 with Foundations. And this year for the Federation, we have J.A. Becker. And welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Pleasure to be here.
Awesome to be here. Thank you.
All right. So you definitely have that Canadian...
Yeah.
That Canadian manners.
I'm a Canadian that also Australian. So I got the both. So I don't sound quite like these guys, but I got the little bit of a
you're accent. Like no wuckers. Thank you.
How long have you been in Australia now?
5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why you still got your Canadian accent.
Yeah. I don't think I'll ever lose it. So no worries, eh?
We won't hold it against you.
This podcast I really wanted to do specifically with the Australians, so we could really just blanket Australia with, for anybody who's an aspiring writer or artist, to take advantage of this contest. We've got two of our more storied judges who are from the Australia, New Zealand area. We got Sean Williams from Australia and Sean Tan from New Zealand, who are all winners back in the within the first 20 years. They were the winners and gone on to amazingly successful careers. And you probably, several of you know some of the other winners, Cat Rambo, and we've got probably a dozen or so from Australia over the years, but now 3 more here. So to start with, what's been your timeline like as an author? I'll start with you, Chris. You were as the grand prize winner last year or 2 years ago with your story, The Trade. So becoming an author, is this something you've always wanted to do, or is this something that came later on after some...
I started writing when I was 15. I started writing a novel on paper by hand. I basically did everything wrong, my first novel. Every single possible thing to do wrong. And then when I was 20, I tried to fix it by just adding more. So I had this 200,000 word short action thriller, which didn't go anywhere. But yeah, I kind of had this epiphany that, maybe, writing is a lot of work and doesn't really get you anywhere. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll just put this down for a bit. And then within 6 months, I had a different idea, and I was writing the next book. And then a similar thing happened. That did it was a lot better. It was a sci-fi. It was, kind of a, they go to a spaceship. They think they're just there to fix the aircon, but no, someone's been murdered and there's a conspiracy on board and they've got to investigate. That kind of book.
Sounds good, actually.
Yeah. And I got a few. The Query Letters got a few requests to see the manuscript, but didn't really take off. And every time the madness kept coming back, and I kept writing another book until I eventually did a master's, because I figured I'm obviously cursed. I might as well get good at this thing. So I started writing short stories, and one of the short stories I wrote since those days, The Trade, was lucky enough to win the contest.
Well, excellent. And Michael, yourself?
I used to love sort of doing creative writing in high school. I had a very encouraging English teacher. I used to love Clive Barker, if anyone knows him,
sure.
Cosmic Horror. And I had an English teacher when she was teaching us Jane Austen, but I was writing stories about decapitations and awful things like that. And she would still encourage me. So I very much enjoyed that, but... it was a bit odd. It was that era I got to that stage, and then it was like, well, now you got to get a real job. And, I put that aside, and instead I went into studying finance and economics, which was so far removed from that it wasn't funny. And to be honest, I think one of the biggest bits of advice that I sort of missed out on was, where do you put these short stories? Where do you sell them? I didn't know. So that's why I put that aside. I didn't do a lot with it. I mean, it didn't stop my mind from wandering, but I didn't do a lot until I was in my mid-30s, and my sister bought me a writing course, and the person who ran the writing course in Canberra, Australia, where I'm from, which is the little-known capital people don't understand. But it was Ian McHugh, who was a grand prize winner of the Writers of the Future in 2008, I believe.
Yeah.
So that's not only where I found out you can actually send short stories somewhere, but I found out about this competition. And he was amazing, read an amazing course. And I kind of got inspired after that. And I went back out and I said, you know what, I'm going to write a short story. And I sent it off to an Australian magazine who was nice enough to actually say, you got past a first reader. And that just gave me that encouragement. And so I went from there. And so I'd say from the last 6-7 years, I've been writing a lot again. This competition in particular was my dream. I used to joke with my wife that I wanted to come over here and do this, and she'd laugh at me because she thinks my stories are very strange and not particularly to her taste. But that was the main thing that got me to where I was at the moment, and winning this has been a bit of a dream.
That's great. You're next.
With me, it actually started with Ron Hubbard's work. When I was younger, I read one of his stories called Devil's Manhunt, and it was just like this action adventure thrill ride that was just like absolutely exciting. And when I read it, I just wanted to do that. I wanted somebody to read something that I had read and go on kind of like an adventure like that. And so I tried to replicate the story, and it was just like absolute garbage. And then I would kind of like I never like submitted it because it was just, never like good enough in my mind to actually go anywhere. But I just kept on trying different action adventure stories and reading more and more of his work. And eventually, like many years later, I kind of connected that he actually had a writing contest, and I began to submit. So I've been submitting to the Writers of the Future for like quite a long time. I'm probably like the oldest person here who's submitted for the longest and never really won anything. I just kind of got up to the point, I think, where I was like, a silver honorable mention was like the highest one. And then I kind of gave up, and then I just gave it one last solid kick at the can, and I was able to actually, surprise, be here now with the win. So it was really his work that like inspired me to kind of like live that action adventure and make people like want to feel something with your writing. So that's kind of like how I flowed.
That's great. So on the subject of science fiction and fantasy, like, what's the scene like there in Australia for science fiction and fantasy?
It's interesting because the local publishers aren't shy of publishing YA sci-fi and fantasy, but you'll have difficulty selling adult sci-fi and fantasy. So a lot of the Australian authors tend to look to the US market in particular to publish their work. And I guess also, like when I did the Masters at UTS, so many of the writers were actually writing spec fic, which is what we call sci-fi and fantasy sometimes. But they felt obliged to enter literary magazines because that was just sort of the done thing. And they didn't realize that, literary magazines are great, but they are after a different sort of story, and they have a different focus compared to I guess the mind experiments that you can find in the sci-fi magazines in particular. I guess we are kind of becoming a little bit of a satellite to the US market, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, contests like this are kind of great because they give Australians a chance to get a level of support that we don't always get back at home. Like we don't get to hang out with Kevin J. Addison too often. I know he came to Supernova 6 years ago or something, but it's pretty rare that authors of caliber come over to Australia. So this has been crazy to see this the amount of
totally
stars
insane. There's
here.
nothing like this in Australia or in Canada or wherever, honestly. Nowhere in the world.
Yeah.
No, it's amazing because you're going to have, obviously you just had Robert J. Sawyer speak with you. And Tim Powers, Jody Lee and I, obviously. But then you've got also about ready to speak with you, or you had Todd McCaffrey tonight. Mm-hmm. And then you'll have Dean Wesley Smith. He would happen to be the first person to be awarded 38 years ago. Yeah. Nini Kariki Hoffman will be here tomorrow. Larry Niven will be speaking with you. And
they're also friendly too. It's not like I've done Worldcon before. I've actually even spoken at Worldcon about 3D printing. And there's a lot of people, and you just see the stars from a distance, but we had the chance to get a beer with these guys and hang out, and that's just blowing my mind a little bit. That's incredible.
Yeah, when we're doing this, you'll probably be down at the BarCon.
Yeah, the BarCon.
As it's
professionally called.
Yeah,
exactly.
Affectionately called. Yeah.
Otherwise, for the purpose of this podcast, it was misnomered BarCon. It's actually an AMA. Ask me anything with the judges downstairs where there's chairs.
And you can and they want you to ask questions.
Yeah.
And they're actually like really friendly and not standoffish, which I don't know why I was expecting that, but they want you to ask them questions. And they're like, I was talking to Robert J. Sawyer, and he's going to come back to me because he wants to think about one of the questions that I asked him. And they're just so friendly. It's inapproachable. It's amazing, honestly.
For them, like I said when we were doing our drilling a little bit ago, they really, really, treasure this moment, that they're able to spend with you. You are where they were 20, 30 years ago. I mean, Robert Sawyer was writing to the contest as a young author, and it was Algis Budrus, the then coordinating judge, who gave him a 3-page critique to his story as a finalist, and he did the things to it, turned his short story to a novel, sold it, and disqualified himself for the contest. Kevin Anderson ended 19 times, and then he pro'd out. Nini Kariki Hoffman was a winner. Dave Farland was obviously a winner in Volume 3. Sean Williams was a winner. Eric Flint was a winner. Dean Wesley Smith published in Volume 1. So it's, that's in Illustrators, we have a similar type thing. It's now, it makes sense in almost 4 decades that you're going to have that, the wheel keeps on turning there. And so what happened for them, they want to do it for the next, generations. And hopefully down the line, then some of you will be in that position as well, because we're definitely not North American centric, with this contest, for sure. Even like I said, it's hard to get Sean over here. That's a fact. Either the Seans, Sean Tan will come when his kids grow up enough that he can actually get away for a week. And Sean Williams he's a professor now, so just getting him when he's not teaching, that's really rough. And that's the problem we had with Orson Scott Card. He loves teaching it, but he's a professor as well.
Kat Sparks might come. She's very enthusiastic.
Really?
Yeah. If you
I would love to. Just after this, let me know, and Kat, I want you to come.
I'm not going to speak for Kat, but I would say hit up Kat. Yeah.
Sounds like you have, though.
No, I remember when Sean Williams presented her in Seattle. That was the year that I also met Octavia Butler, and where she became a judge, like I said, for that short period of time. But that's when I met Kat Sparks when Sean gave her award. That was amazing. And we like to have that, just keep on passing it down. There's so much great talent.
Yeah, if I could ever be in a position where I'm like paying it back to the community, I would be very grateful and lucky.
Yeah, no, Rob Sawyer, when we flew him out, I met him originally at TourCon, and that was interesting too because Owen Hubbard had attended TourCon 1, and I had a photo of him that I presented at the convention at the opening ceremony. I presented it, and I arranged this that the guy who was the con chair in 1940, whatever, 44, when he was there to present, to receive the photo. We blew it up and really nice framed and presented it to him. But it was like hundreds of people were there at that presentation. Just they didn't know there was Owen Hubbard standing next to John W. Campbell and several other the bigger names of science fiction at that time and in Toronto.
Yeah.
So on the whole thing of being a writer, like for yourself, Chris, what makes it so important to you to be a writer?
I think I keep writing because I can't stop the ideas coming to my mind. This sounds like I have some sort of on the verge of developing schizophrenia, but I pretty much write because I had these ideas, I had these great thoughts, and I just want to give them some life, and I almost want to share what seems in my mind like a beautiful world. I've also traveled a lot. I was in South America for 6 months. And that made me obsessed with traveling. So then I was in Korea for a year. I lived in upstate New York for a year. So I've seen a lot of beautiful things, and I just like the ability to share. I'm not only just sharing my stories, because everywhere I go, I talk to people, right? And so I like to just share that wisdom, share that beauty with the world. I guess that's what inspires me. And also, just the ideas and inability to stop, I guess, is also what's happening.
Good. A writer has to write.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. What about you, Michael?
Yeah, a little bit of what Chris is saying resonates. I mean, you don't stop thinking about certain scenarios, and I think there's a point whether, I'm putting it on paper or in my own head or just talking to people. I feel like someone who's always putting together stories and thinking about stories, but I'm sort of reflecting a bit on what Tim Powers was sort of saying in our course today. Why do you then put that into written form and send it out to a magazine? I think there is an element where, you want to show off a little bit. You want to sort of get your ideas out there, have people talk to you about it. So it is a buzz, even when I go out to first readers and, you get reactions back. I've said to many people over this week, I have a great bunch of first readers, one who will stare me in the face and say, I absolutely hated that. And it guts me every time.
That's
but
your
like
wife, right?
No, my wife won't read my stuff. She's wonderfully supportive with hating everything I do, but it's fine. But she gives me the time to write it. No, it's a very good mate. But I find like we have a debate about things, and the idea of then putting stuff out and having others read that, I think that's it's good to put your ideas in paper, put them somewhere, as you said, but also hopefully occasionally put a few interesting thoughts out there which get people talking, debating, and maybe debating with myself, I think.
That's great. And should I just to make it just say J.A.?
Sure. I'm easy. No, my parents call me John Anthony Becker, and then they just called me Tony for my whole life. So it's a bit of a confusion for basically everybody.
John Anthony or Tony,
whichever
you prefer.
So yeah, Tony or J.A. or John. It's no worries. I'm the same. I'm like a mixture of them, of like a compulsion to write, and then wanting like the intellectual stimulation of it. And then the other bit too, which is like tying back to what I was saying in the beginning, is like I want to put people in like the emotional and make them feel something, the same thing that you've felt when you read something. It was something like, it's not like I want to like raise consciousness or whatever, but definitely make them feel something, make them like excited, sad, happy, sort of raise their sort of state or even drop their state of being. Because it's just, I don't know, there's something inside you that just wants to do that, you know? Like it's just I don't think I can quantify it, but it's just wanting somebody to feel something and sharing. It's kind of wrapped up like that.
Oh, good. So now, Chris, you got a story called The Trade. So what's The Trade about?
So The Trade's first contact story, and
and also what inspired it too?
Yeah, I was going to say, it kind of came from the Fermi paradox, which I always find inspiring, but also I was researching.
You always find it inspiring. I'm happy for
What a great question. What was it? Oh, yeah. I found this, a resource online where you could go and do a virtual tour of the International Space Station. Like, you could do a virtual tour of a house. And I was just looking at all the gross, beautiful detail. The astronauts explain how the hatches work, and we've got these blue handlebars and how we get around. And it occurred to me that if anyone is going to make contact, the most convenient people to have a face-to-face conversation with are the few people already in orbit on that space station. So I was like, oh yeah, so this huge ship doesn't want to land. It can just pop over there and have a chat with someone. And that just started the kind of balls rolling. In the end, I guess star of the show is this sort of this alien who comes, and he's got all the technology in the world, but he comes across a bit like a secondhand car salesman. Yeah. Because he's like throwing out all these solutions to climate change, all this stuff out there, but it's all for a price. And he's kind of like really charming, jokey personality. It's a lot of fun. It's actually one of the most upbeat stories I write. And I'm trying to write more upbeat stuff lately because I'm noticing it tends to do better, and I think it brings out a side of me which is a bit nicer. Otherwise I could just get really dark sometimes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries.
We'll keep you upbeat.
Yeah.
Keep me happy. Everything's better that way.
Okay, good.
Nah, it's a bit weird.
So, Michael, foundations. Yours was a really interesting, creepy story, which was, all these stories are fascinating. Like I said, we got yours, and then yours. Anyway, go ahead on that because I've never read a story like that before.
Yeah, so less upbeat than Chris's, but
Depends on your point of view, really.
yeah. No, thanks, John. Mine, I think, look, the core of it is about family. I've probably taken it to a little bit of an extreme, and it's a family responsibilities that go back generations, but the generations live on by being walled into the house itself. And I think ultimately it's about the pressure on a young teenage girl, which probably is not myself, but I was a young teenage boy once, and it's that point in life where you feel those, the breaking, I suppose, of family bonds and family expectations and whether you're striving out for yourself or not. And that's really what the story was about.
So instead of the House of Usher, it's the House of Becker.
Well, that's
me,
John.
but yeah.
So, yeah. And I think, like that's what it's about. I think starting with that story, I'm someone pretty visual. I always imagine odd things. And the thing that got me going on that story was an image of all things, a grandmother walled up into the basement of a house, but not necessarily in a horrific way.
Was there something really that sparked that from like a real life story that you read?
No, not
good.
Not particularly.
Good. I'm happy.
No. It was just an idea, and I think in the end, like, it sounds awful, but the idea I went with it is Grandma D in the story, who is walled up. She's actually quite a positive, responsible influence in that house, even though it sounds like she's in a horrific situation in some ways. But the story was very much about the daughter and the father, and I think that sometimes as a reflection, a lot of my stories deal with family, and I think sometimes it's me reflecting on my own parents, and sometimes with two young kids, maybe a little bit of creeping in the worry of what am I doing to ruin them, So I think that's what the story was about.
I get it. No, it was obviously all these stories are obviously amazing stories because they're winners. They're published from Rise of the Future. We don't do anything other than the top best of the best, which you guys all three are. So, Mr. J.A., Tony, John, fellow Canadian, Australian, for the Federation.
I do not have a good story like they do. All right, I'll be honest. My drive was desperation. Like the Writers of the Future has 4 quarters, and they all end on the last quarter was on December 3rd. Oh, the first quarter is on December 31st,
Yeah.
but it's like the end of the year. And as every writer out there, they're like, I've got to do something by the end of the year. And I had a story mapped out and a story planned, and it just fell apart like 2 weeks before the contest was done. And I was like, I might as well submit this one. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to challenge myself. This is, I'll just see if I'm already going to lose. I've got nothing to lose because I've already lost. So I'm just going to just go for it and just write it. And so there was no inspiration. It was just desperation. And I just kind of flowed along and threw everything out that I'd started with. And I ended up with this story that is, I'm pretty proud of, actually.
So a little bit, just describe the story a bit, because it's fascinating, but
the story,
anybody here knows about your story except for me.
The story is, there's a desperate woman in this story. And I think maybe some of my desperation perhaps leaked through into the story. With her, and she's trying to save her son basically from, I don't want to give too much away, but these things in his head. And she's somebody who's she's not a capable mother. She's she's somebody who's like an Imperial Guard, who's very genetically modified to be incredibly fast and strong. And so her motherhood,
she's the most female you will have ever read in any story ever.
Yeah, so she's indestructible, yet there's this thing where it's she doesn't know how to be a mother, and she doesn't know how to care for somebody, yet
but she so wants to be.
Yeah, she has to, because her son is dying. And so there was this kind of, it flowed along from there, and there is desperation in what she's trying to do, because she only has so long, and I only had so long before the contest submitted as well. So it was one of those things where you don't you don't have the time to overthink, you don't have the time to over edit, and then you just kind of just push it out and never expect to hear from it again. And then I heard Joni call me months and months later, and it was the wrong number or something, or she had, if I felt like she'd mixed it up and called the wrong person. But yeah, I don't really have a great inspiration story other than the desperation of a deadline, really.
Well, that's what Kevin Anderson said. That's the reason. That was one of the things that he most got out of Rise of the Future was learning to write for deadline. That was his inspiration. Sometimes just that alone, I've got to get my story in. So you made a comment about your call from Joni. So any particular, besides it was the wrong number, any other reaction you had to getting that call from Joni that you were a finalist and then the call that you were a winner?
Yeah, I just kind of didn't believe it, honestly. I knew the contest, and I knew that you would get called, but I wasn't nervous between the thing because I assumed that it was not going to happen. I was just so sure that it wasn't because I'd been submitting for so long, and I never even got enough phone call or finalists in the first place. So it wasn't really a big thing for me. It was a wrong number. I didn't really believe it was her, but she convinced me it was. And we had a little chat about actually some of Ron Hubbard's work. So I was pretty sure it actually was her. And then when she called me back to tell me that I had won, I was absolutely flabbergasted and shocked and delighted because it was huge for me. It was absolutely massive.
Well, that's great. I mean, you've been working at it, you said, for...
like way too long. No, it takes as long as it takes.
Yeah.
But yeah, submitting to the contest for a long time, reading and writing and taking courses to try to improve yourself over the course of time. Yeah.
That's great. What about yourself, Michael?
Yeah, look, it's a very, very fond memory, the first time I heard from Joni. I'd been submitting to the contest for a while as well. I think I had... maybe not quite as long as Tony, but I definitely had a couple of silver honourable mentions and a couple of honourable mentions. And as I mentioned before, I joke with my wife, ongoing joke, this is the aim, I'm going to get this thing, we're going to go over to LA, that sort of stuff. And when I put the story in, I thought it was, pretty good, but you never know with these things. And I think Joni has in her head that I screen my calls for her because I don't think I've ever picked up the phone when she's called me directly. And the first time she rang me to tell me I was a finalist, we were actually traveling overseas the last time before COVID hit. So the last time since this trip. And we'd hit in Australia a bit of a black spot. There was no mobile reception and we pulled up and Dings has a message and it was Joni there. And I was trying to work out how to actually call her back and what the country code was and stuff. And yeah, she explained the finalist thing. And look, I was very excited about that. But instantly I overthink these things and you sit there going, well, 3 in 8 chance. I mean, that's great. And I'll be really happy, but then I'll also be disappointed. And is that like, a chance, etc. We end up flying over to Bali, Indonesia with our kids and with some friends, which was really nice. And again, when Joni called the next time, I didn't have my phone with me and I went straight to Message Bank again and the frantic sort of, you need to call me now sort of thing. And again, as I was trying to work out country codes while being in another country and where she called me again. And I always remember it was very excited. My friends and family who by now knew this was a possibility all left me by myself to take the phone call, and she told me I got the second, and I went back and they were all lined up. There was about 7 of us and kids over there just waiting to hear. And when I told them, there was a lot of men embracing men and being very happy and deciding to go out to drinks and stuff. So yeah, it was a great memory that I'm very, very fond of.
That's great. And you, Mr. Chris?
Yeah, so she calls me and says, at first I'm like, Jody? No, Joni. Jody? No, Joni. But yeah, once we cleared that up and figure out who it was, she says, congratulations, you're a finalist. You might be one of the winners who gets to go to LA and do all these things. And I mean, might? Why are you doing this to me? I can't sleep at the best of times. Now I'm just to be like completely distraught until you tell me where I'm going or not. Why? So fortunately, she called me the next day, so I didn't have too long in stasis. But yeah, and then she tells me that I won first place, and I was just completely incredulous. And I was watching when she called me, I was watching the recording of the ceremony because I hadn't actually done that yet, and I was watching the ceremony thinking like, wow, like how cool would it be to win? And then she calls me and I just was over the moon because I've been running for so long and I never got that much attention, that much recognition from anything I'd done before. So I would say, yeah, the biggest, I guess, prize is just a huge wave of encouragement. And you've been writing for a long time. We get a lot of rejection letters. It's hard, So that wave of encouragement for me, was just a real push, I guess, to keep going, to keep trying. And yeah, so see what happens. I'm kind of pitching a new book at the moment. And I've got another book lined up. We'll see what happens. It's still going, basically.
Awesome. That's great. So what did any of you take the online writing workshop?
Yes.
Okay. So what was that like?
It's pretty good. I particularly enjoyed the sections from Orson Scott Card. There was one part where he said, this part about endings is great. He's like, your ending, stop freaking out about your ending, right? Your ending is just whatever momentum you've got in your story, just let it glide down to where it's supposed to end. It should be completely effortless. And then boom, there you are, you've landed. That's your ending. If it's not effortless, then that means there's actually an earlier issue. Like you got to change the middle, or you got to change the beginning. Because if you force the ending to go in a certain way, then it's going to not read like I guess a natural story. It's going to read as if the author came in there and like wrangled the characters to where they were supposed to be. And that's completely, I've just found it so helpful because now, I actually rewrote the ending of this novel, sort of Arabian Nights inspired novel I'm pitching at the moment, based on that advice. And yes, it was just completely just calm down, let it land what it's supposed to. It feels much better now.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So now on the workshop itself that you've been going through this week, what's been like the highlight for you so far?
I just think, first of all, like Tim and Jody, I'm just so impressed with how they riff off each other. It's like they've been doing this for like 50 years together.
Yeah, this is their first time.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought. But they're sort of amazing, but they're not like necessarily giving the same advice. You're getting nice iterations on it. There's even been some interesting, differences of opinion along the way. But I've really been quite impressed with sort of the advice they've passed on about writing in general, but probably a lot of the stuff I've never turned my mind to as much on, the business side, the representation side, what's next about, different views on how to get an agent, what to do with an agent, when to get an agent, the business side of publications, things like that. So even if I'm not quite, like Chris pitching a novel or anything or up to that stage, they're the sort of things I feel like they're not as readily available just by having a chat to your writing group or gathering online. And I found that really, really insightful and helpful and hopefully something I can apply in the future in a couple of years when I'm ready for that sort of thing.
Great. And yourself, Tony?
The coolest bit is kind of the people, the judges are awesome as well, but it's like meeting these guys and become...
Did you know each other before?
No, we didn't know. We all kind of came on the same flight and kind of met at the airport, and then just knowing them and meeting them and knowing... it's absolutely fantastic and inspiring to meet all these other people as well. So I don't know, the judges are awesome too, and learning a ton, which you will learn a lot. But also the people and that there's other people out there in the same struggles as you, and what they've done and how they're thinking of things and advice and tips and stuff like that. It's the community of people as well that's probably the best part of it.
Great. And yourself, Chris?
We just actually had a session today with Robert
J. Sawyer.
Yeah.
J. Sawyer. I was going to say, forgive me, I mispronounced this. And he hit this concept, which has kind of been occurring to me lately, but did very well, which is, and they don't talk about it. I've done a master's of creative writing. They don't mention this, which is, I guess, the saleability or the significance of your work is not just about how well it's written, but it's the theme of your work, or the topic and the crux of it, and whether that's of interest to people. For some reason, writers don't often talk about that. They're all about, this is a great story. But does anyone care about that story, That's such a huge element as to what makes a good seller or what makes a significant work. I feel like journalists are actually more aware of that space than we are. I've got to the point now where I have too many ideas and not have time to write them. So I have a folder called novel ideas. It's about 12 half-baked outlines of novels in there. And yeah, from now on, basically, when it comes time to write a new novel, I basically will go through there and I will think about which of these topics or which one of these ideas can be applied to a topic most significant.
Right.
And yeah, hopefully that will kind of, steer my work some in the future. We'll see. Stay tuned.
We are definitely tuned. So in Australia, what would have helped you along the way as an aspiring writer with whatever the barriers are in Australia? What would be the things that would be best, that you'd love to see resolved or improved upon to improve the scene of science fiction and fantasy in Australia?
I think Canberra's got a good community going on. I think Sydney needs to do a better job of gathering a spec fic community. I don't know if we need to make a guild similar to how Canberra does, but a lot of the spec fic writers I know who work in Sydney were working in silos, working, in the dark for way too long. And it's only after that we've kind of found each other and been able to share stories with each other that we're starting to get to some level of success. And I guess this competition is great because it's free to enter. You got nothing to lose. If you think of entering, stop thinking, just enter. Just add it to your list of places to put stories. Because one of the things you can get out of it, and even the forums, you don't even have to be a winner. You can go to the forums there and you can start looking for a bit of a community of like-minded writers.
We also have the Rise of the Future forum too. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
That's what I meant.
That's Rise of the Future forum. Okay, good.
Up. Yeah.
Good. And do you have any thoughts of what would improve the scene?
I think, this is always a hard one because I suppose it's partly a commercial thing, but I'm really grateful. We have a couple of great speculative fiction magazines, I think, in Australia. They're not necessarily professional, but we've got Aurealis and Andromeda Spaceways. Aurealis has been pro at some stage. And I think they're very good at providing on personal feedback on stories. But I think over the years, and even in the short time I've been doing it, I feel like more small Australian magazines have dropped out of the market than have been added.
Unfortunately, that's been happening.
Yeah,
not just in Australia.
Yeah. So look, it's there's obviously there's no easy fix there, I suppose. But with the shrinking market, I just think magazines that are actually dedicated to promoting at least some space, like Aurealis has 2 out of 3 stories go to Australian authors. That I think very much helps. That's all.
Mm-hmm. And any thoughts?
I think just echoing on what Chris said is just forums and kind of joining up. I think the other thing too for me was like it's I don't know. Some people think that the Writers of the Future is like it's like fixed or it's not like a real thing. But like going on the forums and you can actually chat. Like I was chatting with Martin Shoemaker on the forums like probably 8 years ago or something, and he was responding, and I don't know, it was just kind of like the disconnection on whether or not he wasn't like, didn't seem like it was a real person, but like those are real people out there, and the people on those forums are actually like there to, even like Wolf Moon, who's like, I think he's the forum administrator right now, he's giving advice and chatting, and they're even doing like offering to do critiques and things like that. So if there isn't like a community out there to support you, that actually is a community there to support you, basically. Mm-hmm. And they're all really nice. And you can read back on the forum posts going back years and years. So there's like a rich sort of history there of things. So that's the best thing that I could, is just knowing about it and being a follower and a reader and a communicator on it would probably help.
That's great. Now, what do you think about the idea of, there's been, like I said, at least a dozen past winners, possibly even closer to 20 over the years. If I were to put together a list of all these winners for you guys to like start rounding them up and start knitting together a writing group that, because you've all been helped and be willing to help others, and then you can help yourself along the way too, just with that reassurance. Because Kevin Anderson still boasts that he's the most rejected author out there, but he's also in America probably the highest paid science fiction author. He was, 20 years ago, he was saying I had over 750 rejections. He had a big bowl he would keep.
I'm catching up real quick. I'm about 300 at the moment.
He's in his rear view.
Novels.
He's in your rear view.
Yeah.
But if we were to go through and just go through all the past winners, and just because I'm sure Sean would want to chip in on that and help out, and both Seans actually to help on that and just make it more available, because we've gotten way more international now with the contests, because the podcast now reaches 120 countries, and with that many people entering, like we've got winners from 10 countries in this volume represented now. So that's crazy, that we got that much diversity. So I'd like to propose that, and if so, then you guys we could work together and to put that, because I think it'd be great to getting a group there dedicated to someone that really wants to go. And I know Kat Sparks has had a strong desire to help, and it might need also just others to work there, so it's not just all on one's shoulders.
Yeah, definitely. Hit us up.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I think so.
I'd love to help.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now on, you said you got a couple novels, Chris, but so are you going to continue doing short fiction, or are you going to do just keep it on the novels now, or what's your...
I think I am probably stronger in novels. Like so one of the things we do in this week is a 24-hour story. And I was looking at the story, and it kind of occurred to me that I tried to write a novel in around 3,000 words. It wasn't really a scene. It was kind of like 21 years of this guy's life told rapidly. Anyway, so it was not that bad, but I just think my inclination is more expansive than I can tend to do in a short story. But that said, meeting so many short story writers here, and from what we've learned, I think and particularly knowing that we can just rapidly shoot out a short story. And I used to be such a perfectionist with short stories. I used to do 14 edits for the short story. Just like, maybe I'll just do one for fun, do a couple edits, let it go. That might be great. Because, I always say to any aspiring authors, there's probably a few aspiring authors listening, you got to make sure that writing is fun. Because it takes a long time to get anywhere, a long time to get any recognition. So you got to make sure you're doing it for yourself, and you got to make sure that you don't push yourself too hard and get too perfectionist to the point where it's no longer fun. You got to enjoy yourself. A good metaphor is, for some reason, when people start writing, everyone immediately says like, "Oh, you've been published." But like if someone picks up a guitar and starts learning guitar, no one says, "When's your next concert? When's your album coming out?" No one says that, right?
Okay.
So just like when you start writing, you are like the person picking up the guitar. It's going to take a little bit of time to get into it. So make sure you enjoy it. Try and find some people to, play guitar with, make a band, whatever you might do. And it'll be, a more pleasurable experience.
Good. That's very good advice there. And it's also, the forum is definitely about that, because you're not going to find somebody, you're guaranteed you're not going to find somebody that's going to like rain on your parade. Because a person's allowed to rain once, they're given a warning, they do it again, they're banned from the forum. That's not part of any successful pattern of making a writer. What about yourself?
I feel like I'm a real contrast to Chris. I love short stories. I read a lot of short stories. I certainly, haven't ruled out at some stage doing some longer stuff. I've explored doing, novella length kind of things. But yeah, short stories for the immediate future. Love a rejection letter. I think Tony and I were talking this morning about middle of this 24-hour challenge. Yeah. We both opened our emails this morning, and just to give us a boost with what we were drafting, we had a form rejection waiting for us both.
Yeah.
I got actually 3 over the last 2 days.
Oh, there you go. So it's part and parcel of it. I enjoy that experience. I love a good edit, so I do edit too much, but I find it fun. I think even this morning, what did I send mine off 2 minutes before 2 p.m., but that's because I was giving it my 4th edit in 24 hours. But yeah, short stories, particularly, I like a bit of horror, a little bit of dark fantasy, a little bit of just the new weird category. So that's where I'll be going.
Okay, and you, Tony?
I'm just going to keep on writing short stories for sure. I love them. And there's like a great kind of turnaround on them too. Like novels there's some scary stories about novels. Like you write it in like a year and then you don't hear back from them in like 2 years. I like a shorter turnaround and keep on improving myself. So short stories for now, and then maybe someday a novel, but it's going to be short novel, honestly, maybe a novella. I don't have the patience for it, honestly. Yeah, short stories for me.
Okay. So now, do any of you have like the inclination to switch from earning your living on a day job to earning your living as a professional writer?
I mean, that's always been the dream, right? But to make that reality is a long, long journey. I am tempted to take a bit of a break, maybe 6 months if I can get it approved and etc. To do a lot of writing, a bit of traveling, and see where that goes. So that's tempting. But to fully become a professional writer overnight is risky. They kind of say, make sure you've already got enough sales going on so that you will be safe before you make that switch.
Yeah, well, there's that 20 bucks to 50K conference, which that's based on it, because I interviewed Michael Anderle. He was on the podcast a few weeks back. He's the one that created that workshop, and that formula he worked out to be able to get up to making $50,000 a year with 20 books. And he goes over that whole thing. When you listen to Kevin Anderson, Rebecca Mesta, they have a whole thing on the business of writing and when do you quit the day job. For them, they wait till they had a year's worth of entire expenses in the bank before they quit their day job. And they had already been writing, but they waited a whole year so that that could carry them until they were able to, kick it going.
There's something to be said too for making, I guess, a day job that involves an element of writing. Not that necessarily will be as fun as your fiction, but I found once I started working corporate communications, writing things for copy for websites, my prose got tighter because I was practicing those writing muscles as a day job. So when I finally got a few hours to write something, it just came. We didn't have to worry so much about, simple, efficient sentences. That's why you see so many journalists become authors eventually, just because they've already got the skills. They don't have to do another 10 years. They only have to learn the fiction skills, which is probably already a few years, but still, they've got the prose down pat.
Right.
Yeah.
And what about yourself, Michael?
Yeah, look, again, it's always a nice dream, but I think I've very much accepted the reality that some sort of other income will be, something ongoing, even if things do take off a little bit more. Saying that, I work part-time. I have a day where I'm looking after kids in part, but it's also my day for writing. And so I suppose in some ways I have given up a little bit of income to dedicate some time to writing, and I've never regretted that. I like the idea of taking some time off, but I think I'd have to have, saying I'm not up to the novel stage. I think that'd be the sort of thing if I had a good idea where I just wanted to sit down and nut it out. That might be a nice time to take some time off, but definitely continue working for the moment, I think, to support it.
There's that story of Gabriel Garcia Marquez was in the car with his family about to go off for holidays, and he told them, "No, I've got an idea. We're not going." He grounded his family so that he could write a novel which became 100 Years of Solitude, which didn't took off like crazy and became, started magical realism, or one of the significant works of magical realism. So yeah, sometimes not saying cancel your family's holiday in order to write, but sometimes taking a bit of time off, even if it's a few weeks to pump it out, can be good. Yeah.
And what about yourself?
It would be amazing to kind of write full time, but you know what I mean. I might be I like my job, actually, my full-time job that I have. So
what do you do?
I'm a product manager for a software company. So we do like some AI technology and stuff. So it's actually a lot of fun and working with lots of creative, kind of like really smart people and stuff like that. So I actually really like it. So if I could do less of it, but keep writing, but still keep it, So yeah, and then of course, your dream is to be a full-time writer, but I would love to. My future is to keep both and be able to achieve kind of both of those realms.
I have a new dream actually of writing for games. How good would that be?
Yeah,
because that's basically
there's a seminar tomorrow.
I know. I'm gonna hit that guy up. I'm like, dude.
Yeah,
I can get a visa. Come on. Yeah. Anyway, see how it goes.
Yeah. Now, one thing too is like Dean Wesley Smith, he'll write a lot of times because Hubbard did, he aspired when he was first studying, aspired to be more like Hubbard as an author because he had a 92 words a minute creativity on writing stories. He'd, just write a story 92 words a minute. He could type like 140, but that was his creative speed. And like he says in one of the books that I gave you, he would write up to about 100,000 words a month, 3 hours a day, 3 days a week. And that was his.
And those are like on gigantic typewriters too. We have like these smooth little computers where buttons are so easy to press. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, A. Van Vogt told a story once about watching him write. And he put the paper in, he'd look toward the wall and just obviously he was envisioning the story and he typed the story out. And when I was doing the proofreading for these stories from the Golden Age books that we're going to get you the copy of that, the one that you wanted.
Yeah.
And but we were doing proofreading, all of a sudden you'd see it would stop and then you'd see it would start again. And because that was back in the day, you didn't have the ability to go back on word processing and delete and just move forward there. He'd stop and he'd go back a page and he'd type through a change. If he dead end or something like that, he'd go back to a page earlier. He'd start typing again, and then he'd take it in whatever direction he wanted to go in. And that's I didn't know that until I was proofreading that from the original manuscripts to see what it was on there. But it was amazing. It was just his creative speed, and that's something that Dean will get into as well. That when the story first goes down, it's got the most creation there. Everything's the freshest, and the more you polish it, the more it'll get more subdued because you get the edginess of the story starts going away. Because Dean's got a magazine that he publishes. He writes every story himself, and it's a monthly magazine. And he said he hasn't missed an issue in however many years. And then this last year, he had a goal on his 70th birthday. He wanted to publish 70 books on his 70th birthday, and he made his target. I mean, he is amazingly prolific. So we'll be talking to you tomorrow, and he's an amazing inspiration. Yeah, what I have over there, that's the first volume there. That's Rise of Future Volume 1.
Oh, cool.
Oh, that's what he's... Okay, that's
his.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's in that one. So is Nini Karika Hoffman, who will be speaking to you, I guess, tomorrow or Thursday. So in terms of advice that you would have then for the aspiring writer, either based upon what you're going to run into Australia or just what you ran into, period, the things that you were almost ready to quit, and then you did this to keep you from doing that. So what would you say to the aspiring writer that kind of help preempt a strike on something that you had to overcome so that they don't have to?
Yeah, well, if you're listening to this, you're probably already on the right course because you've already figured out that you're not alone. You figured out that there are resources out there to try and, I guess, find talent. And it can feel like there isn't, but there totally is. Contests like this, searching for talent. So in the end, just try and keep having fun. I was saying earlier.
Yeah.
Keep submitting. I guess you got to get, like, rejection letters are just part of life. I think what you were saying.
It's a terrible
earlier,
life,
Tony.
Honestly.
No, but it is.
It is.
But almost like if you understand that's the default, right? And anything more than a generic rejection letter is good.
Yeah, that's true.
Then and that's the mindset you have to, I guess, take when you start showing your work around. Once you go there, you can only move forward. But yeah, and then try and find some people like you, because no doubt there are people like you in the area, and that can be a bit tricky. But once you find some other people to throw work at and read their work to, you learn a lot from reading work, even if it's not even the best work, because sometimes you learn from other people's mistakes, for example.
Yeah, it'd be good if they read volume 36, because then they could find your story in there.
You saying my story is full of mistakes? Is that what you're saying? I'm kidding. For example, yes, you can read all our stories. Actually, reading Rise of the Future is good because it's a standard which is very high but not unattainable. If you go straight to reading Asimov's, it can be like alarmingly like, why is that story better than that story? It can just be a lot. But to read this work, it kind of gives you a bit of a hope, I guess. Like one day you can get there, and totally you can.
It's the only publication that will publish 12 new, sometimes 13 or 14 new writers a year. None of these Asimovs, they do, I think I was told they do one new name a year.
Yeah, only a couple. They're just trying to look for the best stories, and so you're competing with the people who've been in the field for 40 years, 50 years. You're competing with our judges down there today.
Yeah, they're the ones that are going to be finding an Asimovs. But I think it was, one of the judges told me that Asimovs, well, I think he said one a year, maybe it's a couple, but it's nominal at best.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah. So what about yourself, Senor?
Yeah. So I think I said earlier, one of my problems early on was just, not knowing you could send out to these magazines. So I do think, like, if you've got a bit of a love of writing, genuinely, sure, everyone does it for themselves, but ultimately you want to entertain others. You want to get your thoughts out there. So submitting them, there's a whole range of magazines. So getting online to Submission Grinder or paying for Duotrope, seeing where to send them. I think competitions like Writers of the Future is fantastic. It's free. They'll accept anyone to put into it. Doesn't cost you anything to go into that. But there's also a range of sort of magazines out there, and you want to get as read as possible. So yeah, you aim for your Asimovs, but there are a lot of smaller, hardworking people all around various countries around the world doing small magazines that are still getting your stories out for a readership. And I don't think that's the worst thing to be just starting off with. Even knowing someone's willing to pay you $5 to send it out to their 100 readers is still a good feeling. Chris touched on it, but rejection letters, yeah, don't get to and give up. I think you said before, John, even the great authors have got a whole collection of them. I've read Stephen King's On Writing probably too many times, and he talked about a nail he used to have that spurred him on, which was just thick with old rejection letters. And he, one of my heroes, one of the greats. And so to hear that, I think encourages you. So yeah, don't get turned off by rejection letters, and then keep honing your craft and keep talking to people, keep taking those lessons. I think the online course is an amazing offering from the Writers of the Future. Things like that to keep improving, and then if you love it, keep doing it, keep sending them out, and eventually I think people can improve and start getting picked up.
Good. And yourself, Tony?
I don't know if I could add on anything to what these guys said already, other than just like, in your kind of heart, like it can be really hard being a writer and getting rejected after rejection after rejection. So like, I don't know, in your heart of despair, know that, others like us who have been there have been able to get here, and through submitting and through reading at Writers of the Future, you can actually get to the point where you can get your work published, get your name out there, and just know that others can. If we can do it, it sounds bad, but if we can do it, you can do it as yourself, and it's totally possible. I'm not paid to say this. I'm not like a fake person or whatever. It's like, I struggled as well, and it can get very dark because it's your own personal work that gets rejected, in some cases horribly. And, you can do it. It's possible. That's why we're all here.
Good. Yeah. And one thing that seems between all three of you as a common denominator is persistence, not giving up. And that's that, not to fall into the trap of saying, "Oh, I'll never get it." It very much could be that next story. You never know unless you actually submit the next story, and you keep on doing it. But the thing too is that a writer becomes a writer by writing. And if you think you're going to write a story and expect it's all of a sudden to be recognized as a writer, is I wouldn't necessarily call it foolish, but it's not going to do you any good to have that expectation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of there's been many of the writers that say be willing to throw away your first million words, to build your voice.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did a lot of, I guess, people I studied with, my peers that did the masters. I feel like the masters made everyone into perfectionists, and so they've spent ages on one novel, or they spend like 6 months on one story, but that story might just not have the right topic, or it might be structurally irredeemable. You can write more and more and more, and you'll learn by producing more work rather than trying to refine just the one thing.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that when Owen Hubbard went to, I think it was Harvard, and he was a guest speaker because he was a very famous pulp fiction writer. And so he went to the creative writing class, and he saw they'd gone through and they'd circled his writing and talked, okay, this is exposition and this is all these different, terms for what he's doing. I don't know. That's not what he was thinking of at all, that he was telling a story. And so he told them, because they'd been working on their story for the semester. And he said, it's like, you need to be writing like 100,000 words. And he said they went apoplectic, he was not invited back, because they had that was their story, their creative writing story. And no, you've got to write. A writer has to write and write and write. And so, he wrote millions and millions and millions of words, but because he did that, he was able to sit down and write a first draft story to submit with that they would just publish. He wrote Battlefield Earth, 425,000 words in 8 months. He went on the next year and wrote Mission Earth, 1.2 million words. All 10 books became New York Times bestsellers, also in 8 months, on 2 manual typewriters. So...
Yeah.
I don't know how you can do that, honestly, but
he used one typewriter until it broke, and he sent it to a repair shop and do the other typewriter, and he'd rotate the 2 typewriters.
I'm still not at the point where I can write everything through and then bang, that's it. I got to revise, edit, revise. So it's pretty astounding that I can just crack it out in one go, and it's perfect.
But anyway, we're a couple minutes over the hour slot. I knew we would just be this would go lickety-split here on this. But anyway, it's been great talking to you guys. And I'm really hoping that people in Australia listen to this, rest of the world too. But I really wanted to get a message to Australia because it's such a big country and so spread out that it's easy to miss the fact that there are other like-minded people there who would love to team up with you and share, their love of science fiction and fantasy and being able to create it. And you're not alone out there anywhere in the world, but in Australia as well. So there you have it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, guys. And just if anyone has any questions, anyone wants to reach out, I'm always happy to help anyone. I used to be an aspiring author too, and I'd like to think that people help me along the way. So you can find my details at cwinspear.com.
Great. And Michael?
Yeah, I've got a website at michael-s-gardner.com. So there, it's got my details there, where I've been published and that sort of thing.
Excellent. And Tony?
My website is ja-becker.com.
ja-becker.com.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
All my details there.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for listening. Subscribe to the Writers of the Future podcast wherever you get your podcasts. The Writers of the Future podcast is available on SoundCloud, iTunes, Pocket Casts, Stitcher, Player FM, iHeart, and Spotify. We've also been syndicated on the United Public Radio Network, where you can find these podcasts as well. The Writers of the Future series can be purchased wherever books are sold in the U.S., Canada, the UK, Australia, and South Africa, and available everywhere else on Amazon. Writers and Illustrators of the Future are contests created by L. Ron Hubbard to provide a means for the aspiring writer and artist to be seen and acknowledged. It is free to enter and open to new and amateur short story writers and artists of science fiction or fantasy. Again, thank you very much, Chris, Michael, and Tony.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, guys.